Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to now jump approximately 1200 years from the end of the Roman Empire and the beginning of the Middle Ages to the height of the modern era, from around the 600s AD to the mid-1800s AD. A huge jump. Why are we doing this? Well, partially because we're introducing you to the broad strokes of a conversation that went on for thousands of years, and what we're only doing is looking at the highlights. But also because it is at this time that we have a major shift, and it is this major shift that's going to help you understand how we got to the present era and to the general thinking that you imbibe every day unconsciously. So what was the major shift from the Middle Ages to the modern era? I want to say that is a shift from optimism to pessimism. Now you've heard the old saying of what distinguishes an optimist from a pessimist, right? The optimist says the glass is half full, and the pessimist says the glass is half empty. Well, that's not quite right, is it? Really, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to empty the glass, then the optimist will say that the glass is half empty. And if you're trying to fill the glass, then the optimist will say the glass is half full, and vice versa. So what does this tell us about optimism versus pessimism? It tells us that a good view of life, or a view that says that life in general is good versus a view that says life in general sucks, depends on one crucial concept. What's the goal in life? But true pessimism only comes when you think life is pointless. When any kind of goal that is set is arbitrary and unachievable. And we can say that this is the major shift. Now, if you notice, in the Middle Ages, I characterize life as a happy face. But the main point of the happy face is the smile, isn't it? That's what distinguishes the happy face from the frowny face, the optimist from the pessimist. See, the optimist doesn't say that there aren't low points in life, that life doesn't get low. The idea is what happens at the end, right? At the end, it all picks up. It all ends on a high point. And that's true optimism. And we see that Boethius characterizes the Middle Ages because even though this was an era that agreed that there was a tremendous amount of suffering, no other era in the history of the West is more full of suffering than the Middle Ages, with wars and plagues and short life without any medication or medicine. Most people lived short and brief and miserable, tough lives. But yet, they were optimists. Why? Because they believed the basic picture of Boethius. And that is that even though life is full of striving, there's an ultimate purpose behind all of it. And this ultimate purpose is achievable if one believes. Now, the key here is that this is what reason tells us. It's not something that faith just arbitrarily gives us. Boethius summarizes and gives us the rational explanations as to why we can have an optimistic view and not leave our brain at the door of the church. So what's the major shift? The major shift is when the rational person no longer can believe this. What we're going to see in the shift to the modern age and the rise of science is a shift from believing that life in general has a point to believing that it's pointless, or that any point that it has is arbitrary, what you give it, and therefore as worthless as you are. And so both views agree that life is full of striving towards something. Everybody's striving for a purpose. Life is striving, but the difference is without a purpose, it's pointless. There is no ultimate purpose to life. So what's the crucial difference? The crucial difference is the belief in a creator, God. if there is a creator, then life has a purpose. Even if there's suffering, in the end, it all works out because God is good, and God takes that suffering and works toward a greater good, as we saw in Boethius. But if we can prove that the belief in God is irrational and baseless, then what happens is we have the striving towards something, but no hope of success. No hope that even if we are successful, that what we've achieved is anything better than being able to pick your nose for a long time. And so what we see is the frowny face. Again, the frowny face doesn't deny that there are high points in life. Indeed, the key to the tragedy of life is that there are high points. The higher you go, the farther you fall at the end. Because in the end, there's no ultimate purpose. You seem for a while to do well, but in the end, you die. It all comes crashing down. So, what I'm going to argue is that the major shift is from optimism to pessimism. And the key difference is that everyone agrees that there is striving toward purpose in human life. The difference is whether there is an ultimate purpose, whether there is a point to this striving. What we're going to see when we study people like Schopenhauer and then the Buddha, who greatly influenced Schopenhauer, is the main point of life is that it's pointless. And therefore, that life is suffering, but suffering that's not worth it. The key, though, will be whether we can believe in a creator or not. And so the first lecture that we're going to look at is Schopenhauer's argument that there can be no God. In fact, that the arguments that there are a God, that there is a God, are bad, and that we can literally prove that there can be no such being. And all of this will depend on a shift from one theory of how we gain knowledge to another theory.